JP Miller, and I am the author of the Leaders Like Us series with Carson DeLusa, Rourke Educational Media. Today, we will have questions and a read aloud of the Wendell Scott title. This book was actually one that I suggested to the publisher. So in work for hire, the publisher will say what it is that they want. So they'll sort of give you specs of what they're looking for a project. And so with Carson DeLusa, they suggest some and I suggest some. So Wendell Scott was actually a title that I suggested. And the reason being is that, you know, he's just, the things that he did or what he is known for is something that's kind of non-traditional, or what we would call non-traditional in the African American community, especially in terms of sports. So I just wanted his story to resurface. There are other picture books out there about Wendell Scott, but I just wanted his story to resurface. And so I'm so glad that they also wanted to hear that story and let it be a part of the Leaders Like Us series. I became aware of Wendell Scott probably many years ago. It wasn't like in my youth, you know, because some of the things that he did was, you know, during the 60s and 70s, but it was after adulthood. And it probably was more from the movie Greased Lightning that Richard Pryor played someone or a character that was very similar to Wendell Scott. So I did a little research from that, but I think that was the first introduction that I had to him. Yes, Wendell Scott, this is a biography, and we go into his childhood and then of course into his adulthood and the thing that really made his life stand out. But even as a child, Wendell Scott was very interested in mechanics. He worked alongside his father in the garage, and so his father would ask for certain tools, and so he would have to give it to him while his father had his head down, you know, in the under the hood doing the work. So he became very familiar with the tools and what was needed to fix what. And there was even something that I found in the research that said that he also was known among the kids as someone that would build bicycles and repair bicycles. So he always had that knack for, you know, automobiles and vehicles and being able to maintain them. But then he had this knack for speed as well. So it just, the two things meshed, and it made him the person that he became later in life as a NASCAR sports driver. You know, the thing that I learned the most about Wendell Scott in doing the research and writing this book is, number one, he was a very humble man because he went through a lot. Now, you know, I know that in the 40s and 50s and 60s and 70s, there was racism and things that, you know, that he was up against as a person of color in a sport that was dominated by whites. And he just had, I mean, he just had the courage to withstand all of that. He just let it roll off his back, and he continued on and focused on the things that he wanted to do. Well, you know, the one thing that it was sort of a surprise, but it wasn't a surprise because I know a little bit about the history of NASCAR. So NASCAR actually got its start from people rebuilding their engines to outrun the police so that they could do transport moonshine. And so this was no different with Wendell Scott. So he was actually a moonshine runner, and this part didn't make it into the book because you know, the sensitivity of it with young children. But I found that fascinating. It was almost, he was so clever outrunning the police. It was almost like the cartoons that we watch when, especially with Roadrunner, you know, a coyote would be after him, and then he'd stop behind you know, a billboard or something like that, and then, you know, coyote would keep going past. Well, that was kind of some of the things that they described with Wendell Scott, that he was just that good at outrunning the police that he could hide and they would pass right past him. And so it was actually because of that, he had so many tickets, so many speeding tickets, that there was a promoter that came to town looking for African American drivers. And so they went to the police department and said, okay, who has the most tickets? And so he was one of the ones that had the most tickets. And so the promoters approached him to see if he wanted to be a race car driver. Well, I think this is a good story because to me, you know, there's always good and bad in everything. So we look at Wendell Scott when he started, you know, he was doing his moonshine and he was, you know, one of the fastest drivers doing that. And he turned his skill into something good by being a race car driver. So to me, it's also a lesson on, you know, some of the things that we have, attributes that we have. We have to choose whether we want to use them for good or for bad. And again, like I said, Wendell Scott chose good. His legacy, being the first African American to win one of the Grand National races in NASCAR, is really a feat. Even at that time, it was very difficult, and he did it. And he's had that title for 58 years. It was just recently that Bubba Wallace won, maybe like a month ago or so, on the same, in Talladega, the same event that Wendell Scott won. And I just think that that is a humongous legacy that, you know, on one part that it took so long for another African American to be able to do that, but on the other hand, it was good that it was something that he established and it lasted that long. At this time, I'd like to read for you the title, Wendell Scott, from the Leaders Like Us series. Courage to be great. Have you ever wanted to try something daring? Have you ever wanted to be the first to do something? Wendell Scott liked to drive fast. He wanted to be a champion stock car racer. He was the first Black person to win a major National Association of Stock Car Auto Racing race. Drivers, start your engine, said the NASCAR Grand Marshal. Wendell stopped on the gas pedal. He wanted to win the Jacksonville 200, a championship NASCAR race. Off he went, like he did on the streets back home in Danville, Virginia. That night in Jacksonville, Florida, Wendell took car number 34 across the finish line first. To Wendell's surprise, there was no checkered flag that said he won the race. The title was awarded to a white driver. That angered Wendell. He argued his victory for hours. After the crowd left, NASCAR finally declared him the winner. He got the prize money, but he never received the trophy. Top series. The Jacksonville 200 was the third race of the 1964 NASCAR Grand National Series. The series had a total of 62 races. Hard times. As a young boy, Wendell watched his father repair cars. He studied each tool and how it was used. Before long, he was fixing bicycles for children in his neighborhood. After that, he repaired cars. Wendell had a knack for speed. He drove his car too fast all the time. In a year's time, he got at least 10 speeding tickets. Instead of getting in trouble, the police gave his name to stock car racing promoters. The promoters wanted to hire Black drivers and allow them to race too. If Wendell could outrun the police, surely he could win races. As Wendell grew up, he continued to race. He started winning more. He hitched his car to his truck and drove to South Carolina. His two sons went along to help. He was headed to Spartanburg Fairgrounds for his first Grand National Series race. He had qualified for NASCAR's major division. Fix it. Pit crews fix race cars in the middle of a race. Wendell could not afford one, so he created his own and called it Scott Racing. His two sons and other relatives worked with him. Wendell would sometimes get out of his car during a race, fix his car, and hop back in to finish the race. Hard times were ahead, though. The American South was very segregated. Many people did not like Wendell because he was Black. Racing fans booed him. White drivers tried to run into his car and make him crash. Race officials refused to pay him. A hate group called the Ku Klux Klan tried to scare Wendell away from racing. They could not stop him. More with less. During his career, Wendell had always used old car parts. It was the only way he could afford to keep his car running. He was envious of the white drivers who had lots of money and many sponsors. They got new cars, new engines, and the best pit crews. No one would sponsor Wendell because he was Black. He learned to do more with less. Wendell saved and bought himself a new engine. He was finally going to be able to compete equally. The cool Alabama night was perfect for racing. The Winston 500 race was Wendell's first one with the new engine. He was excited for his new beginning. When the Grand Marshal told the drivers to start their engines, he gladly flipped his car's switch. He was ready to win. The heat from his engine sliced through the cold air. Wendell drove the track faster than ever before. During his first lap, he settled in. By his fifth lap, he was doing well and feeling proud. But in his 10th lap, something went wrong. Everything changed in seconds. Cars began crashing in front of Wendell. There were 21 crashed cars by the time it was done. Wendell was seriously injured. The injuries he got from the accident ended his racing career. After the crash, Wendell retired. He opened an auto repair shop in his community. Wendell was inducted into the Black Athletes Hall of Fame. A movie based on his life was made called Grease Lightning. A true winner. Wendell Scott was very good at racing. Wendell had 495 starts, 1 victory, 20 top 5s, 147 top 10s, and 1 pole position in his races combined. When Wendell Scott died on December 23, 1990, he was inducted into the NASCAR Hall of Fame in 2015. In 2010, his family received a replica of the Jacksonville 200 trophy that Wendell never received. Wendell never thought himself as a leader. He just wanted to be great at what he did. He showed many people how to be courageous and win in the end. And his quote is, "When it's too tough for everybody else, it's just right for me." We also have the timeline of Wendell Scott's life, glossary of terms used in the book, text-dependent questions, and an extension activity. This has been a reading of the title Wendell Scott from the Leaders Like Us series.